You wake to shouting before the sun is fully up. The air already smells of wood smoke and damp straw. A thief is loose, or maybe a man blamed for cutting wood where he should not, and the hue and cry is already moving through the village. Everyone has to answer. If the wrong person escapes, the whole place can be blamed. By noon, that same shared duty leads you into the church, where truth is no longer hunted with boots and voices, but with fire, water, and prayer. Tonight, we begin with one question we can sit with together. In a world with almost no evidence as we know it, how did ordinary people decide who was guilty? The answer starts here, before the sun is even up. The shouting hits you before you're fully awake. It's still dark outside, that heavy blue-grey dark just before the sun thinks about rising, and your eyes are open, but your body hasn't caught up yet. Dogs are barking somewhere close, then more voices, and boots on the dirt lane outside, and a fist banging on the wooden door 2 houses down. You sit up on your straw pallet. Your heart is going fast already, the way it does when something pulls you out of deep sleep, too hard and too quickly. You don't know what's happened yet. You just know from the sound of it that you have to move. Before you get comfortable, if these quiet journeys into the past help you unwind or drift off, subscribing is a gentle way to support more of them. I'm really interested to see our global community, so let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is for you. You pull on your rough wool tunic in the dark. The fabric is stiff and smells like yesterday's smoke and dried sweat. Your feet find your leather shoes on the floor, and you lace them with clumsy fingers, still half in a dream. The cold air off the packed earth floor bites at your ankles. You grab your cloak from the hook near the door, push outside, and step straight into mud. The lane is narrow. In the grey light, you can make out maybe a dozen people already moving, some still tying their belts, one man carrying a wooden staff he grabbed from beside his door. A woman leans out of a window above and calls down, asking what happened. Nobody gives her a full answer, just thief and run, and the mill maybe, or the north field. That's how the hue and cry works. Someone sees something, or thinks they do, and they shout. And once that shout goes up, everyone within earshot has to answer it. Not because they want to, but because the law says they must. Every able-bodied person in the village is expected to join the chase. That's not a suggestion. It's a rule with teeth. If you stay inside, your neighbours notice. And if the person being chased gets away, the whole village can be held responsible. Not just fined as individuals, but answerable together. The whole 100, every family in the area, carrying the weight of one person's escape. So you go. You always go. Imagine being pulled out of the warmest sleep you've had all week, because a voice in the dark is calling for help. Your body wants to go back inside. Your feet are already cold and wet, but you keep walking because not walking means something, and everyone will know. The group moves up the lane away from the cottages, toward the edge of the common field, where the ground opens up a little. The dogs are still loud somewhere ahead. You can hear the damp grass swishing against people's legs, and the occasional grunt when someone stumbles on a rut. We still don't know exactly who they're after. Rumour moves through the group in low voices. Some say it's a man from the far end of the village, someone who has already had trouble before, a missing sack of grain, a complaint from the miller. Others say no, it's a stranger, a travelling man who slept rough near the haystack and was seen near the wrong barn. The truth hasn't settled yet. What matters right now is the chase. There's a quiet pressure in that too, because raising the hue and cry falsely, shouting for a chase that turns out to be nothing, or pointing at the wrong person was itself a crime. So even as you move through the dark with the others, there's a thought at the back of your mind. Whoever started this shout had better be sure of what they saw. A small detail tells us something important here. Notice who is at the front of the group. The men who moved fastest, who were already dressed and carrying something useful. These are the people who want to be seen doing their duty. And notice who is at the back, taking slow steps, staying quiet. It doesn't mean they did anything wrong, but in a village this small, everyone is watching, and how you move this morning is something people will remember. The hue and cry is the village acting as its own police. There is no officer to call, no distant court to send a message to before dawn. If something goes wrong here, the people who live here deal with it. Together, right now, in the cold and the mud and the bad light. That's how it has always been done, backed by a law that goes back generations and made into a formal rule in 1285, when the Statute of Winchester set it down plainly. Every man between 15 and 60 could be called into this. No one was excused just because they were tired or had a field to tend. Softly, you can hear the dogs slow down ahead. The barking changes pitch. Someone shouts, "There!" and the group lurches forward. You follow, not because you can see anything yet, but because the people in front of you are moving with more purpose now, and you stay with them. Over time, people learned that a village without this system fell apart fast. One stolen sack of grain in a lean year is not a small thing. One man who takes from the common store and walks away free makes everyone less safe. So the hue and cry is not exactly about anger. It's about survival. It's about the shared understanding that the village only holds together if people show up when they're called. You're fully awake now. The sleep is out of your legs. Your breath makes small clouds in the cold air, and your cloak is already damp at the hem from the wet grass. Around you, faces you know from the market and the church and the lane look strange in the early light, harder and more focused than usual. The chase is slowing. People are gathering near a hedgerow at the far edge of the field. You can hear low voices now instead of shouts. Whatever happened, whatever was taken or carried off in the night, the village is already deciding together what it means. It started with noise and dogs and cold mud. But now the morning is brightening, and there is still a day ahead of you. A sack of grain waiting by your door, and the market beginning to stir back in the lane. By the time you're back in the lane, the village has shifted into its daytime shape, and the market is already moving around you. You hoist the grain sack back onto your shoulders and feel the full weight of it pressed down into your spine. The rough burlap rough against your palms, still gritty with hearth ash from this morning's fire. It's heavy. It's always heavy. And the morning isn't getting any younger. The market lane is already moving. Stalls are open or close to it. Someone has a small fire going near the bread table, and the smell of it drifts over everything, warm and yeasty, and almost good enough to make you forget the last hour. Almost. But underneath the bread smell, there's the other smell, the one that's always here. Damp straw underfoot, animal dung near the pen at the far end, wet wool on people's backs, and the sharp, sour smell of bodies that have been working since before the light came up. You set the grain sack down near the miller's table and roll your shoulders back. There's a deep ache sitting right between your shoulder blades. Your hands are stiff. You flex your fingers and look around at who's here. Most of the village is here or will be soon. The same people who were out in the field an hour ago are now moving between stalls, trading, carrying, talking in low voices. The morning's chase is still in everyone's face. You can see it. People are a little too watchful, a little too careful about where they look. A woman at the bread stall glances up when a man walks past, and she holds the glance a half second too long. The man keeps walking. Maybe he feels it. Maybe he doesn't. But we notice it, and so does everyone nearby. That's the thing about a village this size. There are no strangers here. Everyone knows who you are, where you sleep, who your family is, and roughly how much grain you had last autumn. So when something goes wrong, even something small, people already have a story ready. They just need a face to put on it. A missing hen, an unpaid tithe, which just means a share of your harvest owed to the church, grain that came up short. Any of these things alone might mean nothing. But if you've already had one hard season, or if someone doesn't like your face, or if you were seen near the wrong barn at the wrong time, well, the story builds. And once it starts building, it's hard to stop. Imagine you have a neighbour. You've known him for 10 years. He helped you mend your roof after the storm 2 winters back. You remember standing up there together, passing thatch down the line. Good man. Quiet. Keeps to himself mostly. But this morning, his name was in someone's mouth during the chase, not as the accused, just nearby in the rumour. And now, at the bread stall, you watch 2 women stop talking when he walks close. They don't say anything. They just stop. And then they start again when he's passed. That's how it begins. Not with a judge, not with a court, with a pause at a bread stall. Over time, people learned that reputation was its own kind of law. If you were known as trustworthy, if your neighbours would stand up for you and say so out loud, you had options. There was a way to clear yourself by swearing an oath. And if you were well regarded enough, other people would swear alongside you. These helpers were sometimes called compurgators, which just means people willing to put their own name behind yours. The more people who would do that for you, the more weight your word carried. A man in good standing might only need to swear once, simply and cleanly, with a few neighbours beside him. That was sometimes called a one-fold oath. Enough people trusted him that the matter could rest there. But if you were already doubted, if the village had quietly decided you were the kind of person who might do something like this, finding those helpers became much harder. You might need 3 times the number of oath swearers, a 3-fold oath, just to carry the same weight. And if no one would stand beside you at all, if your name was already too damaged for anyone to risk their own reputation on yours, then oath swearing wasn't going to be enough. You'd need something harder, something that couldn't be argued with, something that left the decision in the hands of others, other than your neighbours, because your neighbours had already made up their minds. A small detail tells us something true here. The law didn't treat everyone the same, not because it said one person mattered less, but because it leaned on what the community already believed. And the community believed what it saw every day, in the market, on the lane, at the well. Your standing in this village was built over years, out of small moments, just like this one. A debt paid on time, a hand offered during harvest, a promise kept, or not. We are not judging these people. We are feeling what it was like to live inside a system like this, where survival was tight and trust was everything. When your grain store is thin and winter is coming, you don't have much room for doubt. You need to know who you can count on. So yes, people watched, and yes, what they saw shaped what they believed, and what they believed could follow a person all the way into a church. You pick the grain sack back up. The ache returns immediately. That dull press across your upper back. You shift the weight and start moving. The market noise is behind you now. the low talk, the scrape of a cartwheel, someone calling a price across the lane. The path toward the church is quieter, narrower. The stalls fall away and the noise softens, and the air gets a little cooler as you move into the shadow of the old stone wall. Other people are drifting in the same direction, not in a group exactly, more like a slow gathering, the way water finds its way downhill without anyone telling it where to go. Your footsteps sound different on this part of the lane, more careful. The bread smell is gone. What's left is cold stone, an old wood, and the faint trace of candle smoke drifting out from the open door ahead. You slow down just slightly before you reach it. The stone floor finds you the moment you step inside. It's cooler in here, dimmer. The light at the door is pale and thin, and it doesn't reach very far inside. Your eyes take a moment to adjust, and while they do, your other senses fill in the rest. Cold stone under your feet, even through the soles of your boots. The smell of old candle wax and damp wood and something heavier underneath it all. Like the stone walls themselves have soaked up years of smoke and breath and prayer. You can still smell the market on your own cloak, wet wool and animal dung, and the faint trace of bread. In here, that smell feels out of place somehow, like you brought the outside world in with you. And now, it doesn't quite fit. Before you came in here, you were purified in the only way this world knows how. Not washed exactly, but prayed over. There were words said at the door, low and steady, asking that what happens inside be clean and true. That transition matters. The mud on your boots is the same mud. But the words said over you at the threshold are meant to mark a difference between what you are out there and what you are in here. A witness, part of something that is asking for more than human judgment. The church is not empty. People are already standing along the walls and in the middle of the floor, not packed in tight but close enough that you can hear them breathing. And they are quiet. That's the thing that hits you hardest. These are the same people who were shouting in the lane before sunrise. Boots in the mud, dogs barking, voices carrying across the field. Now they stand almost still, hands at their sides, eyes forward. The duty hasn't changed, but its shape has. This morning it asked to run. Right now it asks for watching. You find a place to stand near the left wall. The stone is cold against your shoulder, through your cloak. You look around at the faces you know. The man from the bread stall. The woman who was at her window this morning when the shouting started. The miller's boy who looks younger in here somehow is smaller. Everyone looks a little smaller in here actually. The ceiling is low and dark with old wood beams, and the candles along the front wall don't push the shadows back very far. The room holds the dark in its corners, like it's been doing that for a long time. Imagine standing in a room full of people you have known your whole life and feeling like you don't quite know them today. You need these people. You need them at harvest when there are too many hands needed and not enough hours of light. You need them in winter, when a neighbour's fire or a shared meal is the difference between managing and not. And yet right now, one of them might be someone you care about. And all of them are here to watch what happens next and call it God's verdict. That split feeling is real, and it sits in your chest like a stone. Because here is the thing nobody says out loud, but everyone understands. If the accused walks away from this with no clear answer, if the village leaves today with doubt still sitting between neighbours, that doubt doesn't disappear. It festers. It turns into a cold word at the well, a withheld hand at harvest, a feud that runs quietly for years and costs everyone something. A small community like this one cannot afford unresolved suspicion. People are too close together. Their lives are too tangled. So what happens here today is not just about one person's guilt or innocence. It is about whether this village can stay whole. The ordeal is a way of handing the question to something bigger than any one neighbour's word, so that whatever comes out the other side, everyone agrees to it. Everyone was here. Everyone saw. A small detail tells us something about this room and what it means. The church is not separate from the village. It is the village, gathered up and brought inside a heavier kind of order. The same hunger, the same fear, the same need to know who can be trusted, all of it walked in through that door with everyone else. The sacred part isn't that this place is far away from ordinary life. It's that ordinary life came here because it needed something ordinary life couldn't provide on its own. Over time, people learned that when proof is hard to find, you need a sign everyone can agree on. There were no records to check, no way to test a claim the way we might today. What you had was what people saw, what people said and what people believed. And belief, in a village like this one, ran deep. So when a community needed to settle something that couldn't be settled by words alone, it made sense to bring it here, into this room, and ask for a sign that everyone in the room would trust. That's what the ordeal was. Not cruelty for cruelty's sake, a controlled thing. A miracle with a shape to it, held inside a sacred space, witnessed by the whole community, so that the answer it gave would be one nobody could argue with afterwards. Fear and belief are not opposites. You can be afraid of something and still believe it is right. Everyone in this room is carrying both of those things, the accused most of all. Softly, you can hear a sound from the front of the church, low and steady, like something breathing near heat. People shift slightly, not much, just enough to tell you that something is ready up there, near the altar, near the candles. The air at the front of the room is a little different, warmer, not by much, but you feel it. Your hands are cold. You press them together and feel the rough skin of your palms, the grit still in the creases from the grain sack and the morning's work. Ordinary hands, the kind of hands everyone in this room has. Work-worn and human and very aware right now of what it means to touch something. The people near the front begin to part slightly, opening a narrow path toward the altar. You take one slow step forward with everyone else, because the room is moving that way now, drawn toward whatever is waiting at the front, glowing in the dark. The warmth reaches you before anything else does. You get close enough to see it clearly before anything else registers. The iron bar is resting in a bed of coals near the front of the church. It's not orange exactly, more of a deep, angry red, the colour of something that has been pushed past its ordinary state and turned into something else entirely. The coals around it pulse faintly when the air moves. The smell coming off it is hard to name. Hot metal and ash and something almost sweet underneath. The way very intense heat can smell almost clean even when it isn't. Your hands feel it. That's the strange part. Your hands, which have been cold all morning, which still have grit in the creases from the grain sack and the muddy lane, suddenly feel very present, very soft. You are aware of them in a way you aren't usually. The skin on your palms feels thin. A small detail tells us something important right here. The people in this room have worked with heat their whole lives. Fire for bread, fire for warmth, fire for metal work in the smithy down the lane. Heat is not new to any of them. But this heat is different, and everyone in the room knows it, because this heat has a purpose beyond cooking or keeping warm. This heat is meant to carry a question and come back with an answer. The test works like this. The accused has to pick up the iron bar and carry it. 9 feet, 3 paces, about the length of 3 big steps. That's the standard measure for what was called a one-fold ordeal, the basic form of the trial. Then the hand is wrapped in cloth right away, and the wound is left alone. On the 3rd day exactly, a priest unwraps it and pronounces what he sees. If the flesh is healing cleanly, that's taken as a sign of innocence. If it has gone bad, swollen, dark and full of infection, that's read as guilt. The wound itself becomes the verdict. So the moment of touching is not the whole trial. It's just the beginning. The real answer comes later, in the quiet, in the waiting, in what the body does or doesn't do over 3 long days. We'll get there. But right now, we are still here, in this room, watching the bar glow in its coals. The priest stands to one side. His role is not to carry out punishment. His role is to make this moment sacred, to ask God to be present in what is about to happen, to make the test mean something beyond simple pain. He has blessed the fire. He has prayed over the iron. The idea is that God sees what people cannot see and will act through the wound. An innocent person in this belief would be protected. A guilty one would not. Imagine believing that with your whole body, not just as an idea, but as a real and present truth. That the God you pray to every week in this very room is watching right now, and that what happens to that hand over the next 3 days will be his answer to the question no one on earth can settle. For people in this village, that belief is not a small thing. It is the largest thing. It shapes every part of how they see what is about to happen. And yet, the body still knows. You can see it in the accused, who stands near the coals with shoulders pulled slightly inward. There is no pretending that this doesn't hurt, that faith makes the heat less hot. The mind can reach for God while the body braces for pain. Both things are true at the same time, and everyone in this room is holding both of them. Over time, people learned that the ordeal wasn't one size fits all. If the charge was serious or if the accused was already poorly regarded in the village, the ordeal could be made harder. For someone considered untrustworthy or accused of something grave like treachery, the iron itself could be 3 times heavier than the standard bar. Not a longer carry, not a different prayer, but a heavier iron, weighted to match the weight of suspicion already sitting on a person's name. What they called a 3-fold ordeal instead of a 1-fold ordeal. The village's opinion, which followed everyone from the market lane into this room, could shape the weight of what a person had to carry. Literally. The ash from the coals has drifted onto the floor near where you're standing. You can feel a faint grit under your boot. The same ash is on your palms from the morning's work, and the grain sack and the cold ground of the lane. Hearth ash is everywhere in this life. On skin, on clothes, on rafters, in the air on cold mornings. It's the ordinary residue of staying warm and fed. And here it sits at the base of something that is about to decide a person's fate. Nobody in the room is moving much. The priest says something low that you can't quite hear from where you are. The accused looks at the iron. The iron does not look back, but it glows, steady and unchanged, indifferent to everything happening around it. Softly, you can hear the coals shift. Just a small sound, a faint settling. The heat coming off the bar makes the air above it move in slow, lazy waves. So the wall behind it seems to shift slightly, like water. Everyone is watching that bar Every eye in the room is on it. The breath of maybe 30 people is being held or let out very carefully, as if too much movement might disturb something that needs to stay still. The accused reaches toward the iron. The hand comes close. The hand comes closer. The rough cloth of a sleeve pushes back from the wrist, and then the hand closes around it, and the room pulls into a silence that has no good name. Just weight and heat and the knowledge that whatever comes next belongs to the next 3 days, and to God, and to whatever the wound decides to say. The hand lifts away from the iron, and the room does something strange. It gets quieter, not because anyone starts making less noise, but because everyone seems to stop at the same moment. Breath held, body still, eyes fixed on the accused, and the priest moving quickly now, with rough cloth to wrap the hand. The cloth is coarse, the kind of burlap weave that catches on dry skin, and you can see it pulling slightly as the priest winds it tight around the palm and fingers. His hands are practiced and steady, and then it's done, and the iron is back in its coals, and the whole terrible bright moment is over. Except it isn't over. Not really. The smell hits you a second later. Singed skin. It's not a strong smell, not like a cooking fire or a smithy. It's closer and quieter than that, and it sits in the back of your throat in a way that's hard to ignore. You breathe through your mouth for a moment. Around you, other people do the same small thing without looking at each other or saying anything about it. Nobody moves quickly. That's the thing you notice most right now. People shift their weight from one foot to the other. A man near the wall clears his throat softly. A woman adjusts her cloak. These are tiny movements, careful ones, as if everyone has agreed, without speaking, that this moment needs to be treated gently. The stone floor takes each small step and gives nothing back, just that low, flat sound of boot leather on cold church floor. The accused stands with a wrapped hand, held slightly away from the body, not raised up, not hidden, just held, like something that now belongs to a process bigger than one person. The face is hard to read from where you're standing. You can see the jaw is tight, that's all. Imagine carrying something like that. Not just the pain, though the pain is real and present and not going anywhere, but the waiting, because that rough cloth binding isn't the answer yet. The question won't be answered for 3 days. 3 days of going back to the cottage, drawing water, moving through ordinary hours, with everyone in the village knowing what's underneath that burlap and what it might mean when the priest unwraps it. If the wound heals clean, that's innocence. If it goes dark and swollen and hot with infection, underneath those rough wrappings, that's guilt. The body itself will speak, but not yet. We are all standing in the middle of that now. The act is finished, but the judgment is still somewhere ahead, held inside skin and cloth and time. A small detail tells us something here. Look at the hands of the people around you. Rough palms, cracked knuckles, ash in the skin lines, the same grit you've been carrying since before sunrise. These are working hands. Hands that have pulled grain sacks and patched roofs, and wrung out wet cloth in cold water, and done 100 hard things, without ceremony. Suffering is not new to anyone in this room. Hunger visits most of these cottages in the thin months. Cold gets into the walls no matter what you do. Sickness takes children, animals, and sometimes the strongest person in a household without warning. Pain is not a stranger here. It lives close, so the ordeal fits inside that world in a way that might be hard for us to feel from the outside. It is not a comfortable thing, but it is a familiar kind of thing. A body put through something hard, and then watched, and then read for signs. That logic makes rough sense in a life already shaped by endurance. And here is what matters most for understanding why people accepted this. This was not meant as punishment. It was meant as a search for truth in a world that had almost no other way to find it. No written records to check, no way to test a claim the way we might today. What you had was what people saw, what people said, and what people believed. And belief, in a village like this one, ran through everything. The market, the harvest, the church, the daily prayer said before a meal. So when the law needed an answer, it couldn't reach by human means. It turned to God. Not as a last resort, but as the most reliable witness available. The priest who had unwrapped that cloth in 3 days was not guessing randomly. He was reading what he believed was a message written by God in flesh. A wound. Something you could see and touch and smell and hold up in the light. In this world, that was the clearest kind of proof there was. Softly, you can hear the priest begin a low prayer near the altar. His voice doesn't carry far. It's more like a murmur than a speech. Something meant for the room and not for outside it. A few people near the front bow their heads slightly. The candles along the wall push small orange circles of light onto the stone, and the shadows between them are very dark. You think about the morning. The shout before sunrise, the mud on your shoes, the dogs, the grain sack pressing your spine in the market lane. All of that feels a long time ago now, even though the sun has barely moved. The day started in noise and running, and has arrived here in this cool and careful stillness, with a wrapped hand and a low prayer, and 30 people breathing slowly in the dark. The ordeal of fire doesn't end when the iron leaves the hand. It settles into the room, into memory, into the body of the accused, and into the watching bodies of everyone who witnessed it. It will be in people's mouths tonight, in quiet conversations near hearth fires, in the way people look at each other across the lane tomorrow morning. The wound is sealed under cloth, but the question it carries moves freely through the village, and that question will keep moving for 3 days, sitting underneath every ordinary task, every meal, every bucket of water drawn from the well, until the priest's hands unwrap that rough binding and the village gets its answer. But fire is not the only way a community like this one sought that answer. You step back out through the church door, and the cold air meets your face, and the sound of the village rises around you again. The path ahead narrows, and the grass on either side is long and wet, and somewhere not far from here the water is waiting. The pond sits in a low dip in the ground, and the cold down here is a different kind of cold from the churches. The banks are soft, and your boots press into the mud with each step. Reeds grow thick at the edges, brown and bent from the cold. The surface of the water is flat and grey, showing the sky back at you without much warmth. A rope has already been tied around the wrists of the accused. The other end is held by 2 men standing on the bank. Their faces are careful and still. They're not doing this with pleasure. They're doing this because the day has asked it of them, and so they do it. You watch from a few steps back. Your arms are crossed over your chest, not because you chose to cross them, but because the cold pushed them there without asking. So here's the logic of this test, and it is strange, right? It goes like this. The water used in this ordeal has been blessed by a priest. It's been made holy. And the belief is that holy water will not receive a guilty person. Think of it like the water itself has a kind of memory of being made clean, and it pushes back against anything that doesn't belong. A guilty person floats because the holy water rejects them, refuses to take them in. But an innocent person, someone the water accepts, someone it welcomes, that person sinks. Sinking means the water drew you down into itself. Sinking means innocence. That's the whole logic of it, held simply in 2 words. Float, guilty, sink, innocent. Imagine standing on that bank and understanding that going under is what you want, that the cold, dark water pulling you down is the good outcome. Your whole body is fighting that idea, even as your mind tries to hold it still. The accused is lowered in, not thrown, lowered carefully by the rope. The water closes up and the surface breaks into small rings that move outward toward the reeds and then go still. Everyone on the bank is watching the surface. The rope goes taut. The men holding it feel for movement, for rise or fall, for what the water is saying through the pull of the line. The rope is not just for control. It's there so the accused can be pulled back out again, retrieved, no matter what the water decides. Without it, a verdict of innocence could become a drowning. So the rope is practical, and it is merciful, and it is terrifying, all at the same time. A small detail tells us something here. How tightly the accused is bound, how much slack is in the line, how the body is positioned when it goes in. All of these things affect what happens next, and no one at the bank can fully control all of them. The water does what water does. The body does what bodies do. And yet everyone watching is reading the outcome as if it were a clear and deliberate message from God. That uncertainty is part of what makes this so hard to stand next to. One small shift, a little more slack in the rope, a breath held at the wrong moment, and a life bends in a completely different direction. The people on the bank know this, they feel it, and still they watch because the village needs an answer. And this is the form the answer takes today. Over time, people learned that the water ordeal was not the same everywhere. Different places used it differently. Some regions had their own customs about how the accused was bound, how deep the water needed to be, who held the rope, and for how long. What counted as floating in one village might look different from what counted as floating in the next. The rules were shaped as much by local habit as by any written law. So the same test in 2 different places could feel like entirely different things. The surface of the water moves, just slightly. The men on the rope look at each other. Low voices, a word or 2. The accused is pulled back up, and the reeds shiver as the rope drags against them, and water runs off cloth and skin and drops back into the pond. You watch the accused stand on the bank, shaking. The cold is immediate and total. A wet cloth clings to the skin, and the wind finds every gap in it. Someone moves forward with a rough piece of cloth to cover the shoulders. It's a small gesture, but you notice it. Even in a moment this hard, someone thought to bring something dry. We are watching something that feels cruel to us, and we don't need to pretend otherwise. But we are also watching something that made a kind of sense inside this world. Fire and water both ask the same question beneath the surface. Not what can be shown with records or witnesses, but what sign will this community accept? What will feel true enough to everyone standing here to let the village move forward? That's what both tests are reaching for. A shared sign, something everyone saw together and can carry forward together into whatever comes next. The pond goes still again. The grey sky sits in the same place as before. The reeds stop moving. The men coil the rope slowly, hand over hand, and the mud on the bank holds the shape of boots and shuffled feet and the long mark where someone was lowered in and pulled back out. Your body is colder now than it was this morning in the lane before sunrise, colder than it was on the church floor. The cold has moved into your shoulders and settled there. You turn back toward the village, and the path rises gently, and the reeds thin out, and the smell of the water fades slowly behind you. And as it does, something else moves into your chest, something heavier than cold, because you know the person who is just in that water. You have known them for years. The friend in the line that weighs in your chest has a name now, and it belongs to a person. There was a morning 2 harvests back when your cartwheel broke on the lane coming up from the lower field. The load was too heavy to move by hand, and the light was going, and you were standing there looking at it, not knowing where to start. And this person came around the bend, saw your face, set down their own load without being asked, and just started working alongside you. No conversation about it, just hands on the wheel and shoulders into the cart, and the problem got smaller. You got home before dark. You never said much about it afterwards. You didn't need to. That memory is sitting right next to everything else today, right next to the shout before sunrise, and the mud on your boots, and the iron bar glowing red in the church, and the cold pond and the rope, and all of it. It doesn't go away just because the day asked for something harder. Imagine standing in a crowd of your neighbours, watching someone you know face something like this. Your feet are on the same ground they're on. You breathe the same cold air, and you stand still because the day has asked you to stand still, and because you understand, somewhere underneath the feeling, why. A small detail tells us something true about village life here. Every single task that kept people alive in a place like this needed more than one pair of hands. Ploughing needed neighbours. Having needed neighbours. If your roof came down, or your animal got sick, or your child needed watching, you needed the people around you. That wasn't just kindness. That was how survival worked. So when something went wrong inside that tight web of people, it didn't just hurt the person it happened to, it threatened the whole thing. A stolen sack of grain in a thin year meant someone else's family ate less. Cut wood taken from the wrong place could mean someone froze. Trouble left unresolved didn't stay in one corner, it spread. And there was something worse than the trouble itself. A village with no way to settle things didn't just stay stuck, it split. One family stops helping another. A debt goes unpaid and the silence around it hardens. Someone's name gets said in the wrong tone at the market, and the story grows from there. Without any real central power to step in, without a court you could send a letter to and wait for, a grudge between 2 families could run for years. It could pull other people in. It could make the whole village less safe, less able to work together, and less able to get through a bad winter. The ordeal, strange as it looks to us now, was partly a means of preventing that from happening. It gave the village a decision everyone had witnessed together, something no single person could say was rigged, because God was meant to be the one making the call. Once the answer came, the matter was supposed to be settled. Not perfectly, not always cleanly, but settled. And that mattered more than we might think. So the village needed a way to deal with it. And the people in it, including you, including the person standing over there with the wrapped hand, had all grown up inside that understanding. The system wasn't handed down from a distant, cold place. It grew out of the ground that everyone stood on together, out of shared fields and shared hunger and shared winters. That logic held the village together, even when it hurt people. even when the person being tested was someone whose help you'd taken and whose face you knew well. You rely on your neighbours for work. You rely on them to speak for you if your name ever comes up in the wrong way. Your reputation in this village is partly made of what other people are willing to say about you out loud. That's not a small thing. It's as real and practical as the grain in your store. So when the village asks you to stand here and witness this, you stand here. Because the village goes on living after today. You will go on living here after today. And the only way that works is if people keep showing up when the rules ask them to, even when it costs something. We are not watching cruelty for its own sake. We are watching a community trying to hold itself together using the tools it has. Faith is one of those tools, not because it makes the fear smaller, but because it gives the fear a shape people can move inside. If God is the judge, then the outcome isn't your neighbour's fault. It isn't the priest's fault. It isn't yours. The responsibility extends beyond the village lane, and that makes it possible for people to keep living next to each other afterwards, whatever the wound says in 3 days. That's the social contract here. That phrase just means the unspoken deal everyone in a community makes with each other. We follow these rules, even the hard ones, because we need each other to keep going. The accused knows it. You know it. The men who held the rope at the pond know it. Nobody here is pretending it's easy. But everyone is doing it anyway, because the alternative, a village where trust breaks down completely and no one can settle anything, is worse. Softly, you can hear the wind moving through the lane. A dog somewhere in the distance, the low creak of a cart on the road beyond the hedgerow. The village is still going. Bread still needs to be made, water still needs to be drawn, and animals still need to be fed. Life doesn't stop and wait for the wound under the cloth to give its answer. So people move back into their hours, back into the ordinary weight of the afternoon, back into straw underfoot and smoke in the rafters, and the particular tiredness that comes from a day that has asked too much of the body and the heart both. The accused walks a path not so different from yours tonight, through the same lane, past the same doors, under the same grey sky. And somewhere ahead, the light is already beginning to change, the afternoon thinning out towards something quieter, and the village settling back into its small sounds, while something much bigger waits beneath it all. You walk back into the lane, and the village is just doing its thing. Someone is carrying water. A child is chasing a chicken near the far end of the common. Smoke is rising from 2 or 3 chimneys, and the smell of it drifts low across the path. Wood smoke and something boiling, onions maybe, or old barley in a pot. The ordinary sounds are all there, and yet nothing feels ordinary, not even close. The bucket handle is cold in your hand when you go to draw water. That's a thing you do every afternoon without thinking. Your hand wraps around the iron, your arm takes the weight, and you walk back. Today, your hand feels different when you do it. You are aware of your skin in a way you weren't yesterday. The handle presses into your palm, and you think about cloth wrapped around a hand, and you think about 3 days, and you set the bucket down near the door and stand there for a moment longer than you need to. That's what the weight does. It gets inside the small things. The wound check isn't happening today. It isn't happening tomorrow either. The priest won't unwrap the cloth until the 3rd day, because that's how the ordeal works. The moment in the church was not the end of the process. It was the beginning of a different, slower part. The body needs time to show what it is going to do, heal cleanly or not. And until that 3rd morning comes, everyone in this village is living inside the question, You eat your bread in the late afternoon. It's dense and a little gritty, the way it always is, made from coarse flour that doesn't sift clean. You sit near the fire and chew it slowly, and the fire makes a low sound, and the walls of the cottage hold the warmth in close. Across the lanes you can hear low voices, 2 people talking near a doorway. You can't make out the words, you don't need to. You know what they're talking about. Rumour doesn't need loud voices to move. It moves in the quiet spaces, in a look across the lane, in the pause before someone answers a question, in the way a conversation stops when a particular person walks past. The village is full of those small pauses right now. Everyone is watching the accused without looking like they're watching. Everyone is carrying the morning in their chest and going about their afternoon anyway, because the grain still has to move and the animals still have to be fed, and none of that waits for justice. A small detail tells us something real here. The waiting wasn't separate from village life. It ran right through the middle of it. Every task you did over those 3 days happened inside the shadow of what was coming. A hand on a plough handle, straw underfoot in the animal pen, the last thin light on the lane at the end of the day. All of it carried the weight of the church, the iron, the wrapped cloth, and the question that hadn't yet been answered. And here is what makes the waiting even heavier. There was no other way to find the truth. This was what the ordeal was for. The crimes no one saw, the things that happened in the dark with no witnesses, no record, nothing to check. What people call occult crimes, which just means hidden ones. Not magic, just unseen. When something was taken in the night, and nobody could say who did it, when a wrong was done, and the only people who knew were the one who did it and God, the ordeal was the only tool the village had. There was no other path to an answer, so the waiting carried that weight too. Not just patience, but the knowledge that if the wound doesn't speak clearly in 3 days, there may be nothing else to say at all. Over time, people learned that this was actually part of the point. The 3-day wait was built into the ordeal on purpose. It wasn't just a delay. It was where the divine judgment actually lived, in the slow, silent work of flesh either mending or not mending. The dramatic moment with the iron was what everyone saw together. But the real verdict came quietly, in the dark, in the body of one person, while the village went on around them. Imagine carrying that for 3 days, going to sleep not knowing, waking up and knowing you still don't know, doing your chores with that underneath everything, heavy and unmoving. The afternoon light is going now. You can see it in the colour of the sky above the rooftops, that pale yellowy grey that comes before the cold sets in properly for the night. The lane is emptying. People are moving inside. The chicken is gone. The child is gone. The smoke from the chimneys is thicker and lower as the air cools, holding it down. Your body is tired in a way that goes deeper than just today's work. The grain sack this morning, the mud before sunrise, standing in the church on cold stone for a long time, the walk to the pond and back, and the afternoon chores on top of all of it. Your back aches across the middle. Your feet are damp and have been since the reeds at the water's edge. The muscles in your shoulders have been tight since the shout that pulled you out of sleep this morning, and they haven't fully let go since. Stress does that. It takes up space in the body, and it doesn't leave quickly. The fear from this morning, the tight feeling in the chest during the ordeal, the cold at the pond, the look on your friend's face, all of that is still in your muscles and your jaw and the back of your neck, sitting there quietly while you move through the afternoon as if things are normal. You push open your door. The warmth of the fire inside reaches you right away. The coals are low and red, and you stand near them for a moment before sitting down, letting the heat find your hands and your face. Outside, the village has gone quiet. The wound is out there somewhere in the dark, wrapped and waiting, and there is no record of it anywhere. No document, no witness who can say what the truth is. Just cloth, skin and time. And the night has a long way still to go. You sit near the fire, and the flames have gone low. Just coals mostly, the same deep red as the iron bar this morning, though you don't want to think about that right now. The cottage is warm enough. Your cloak is hanging near the door, still a little damp at the hem. Your boots are off. The stone floor is cold under your feet, but you don't move. You just sit and let the quiet settle around you. The day was one kind of thing, the evening is another, and somewhere in between, if you sit still enough, you can feel that the world you moved through today is older and more complicated than it looks from inside a single village lane. Here is something we can sit with together. The ordeal, the iron bar, the blessed water, the rope, the priest's hands. None of that appeared out of nowhere. It grew slowly, out of a world where proof was almost impossible to find, and decisions still had to be made. You couldn't write things down if you couldn't read. You had no way to test a claim the way people do now. What you had was your neighbours, your priest, your faith, and the shared need to settle things and keep going. So the ordeal made sense. It gave everyone a decision they could stand behind together, because God was meant to be the one making it. But even while villages like yours were still using fire and water to settle things, other ways of finding answers were already growing up alongside them. Oath swearing had always been there, where a person swore their innocence, and others swore with them. And in some places, groups of local people were being called together to hear what happened and give a verdict. What would eventually be called a jury of presentment, just neighbours chosen to decide together. It wasn't one clean system. It was several things running at the same time, layered on top of each other, each one filling in where the others left gaps. A small detail tells us something true here. Even on a day like today, with the ordeal fresh in everyone's memory, the village was already using other tools. The hue and cry this morning was one. The way people at the market looked at each other and quietly agreed on a version of events was another. Reputation, oath, community judgment, these things all counted. The ordeal was just the sharpest edge of a much wider set of ways that people tried to know what was true. Over time, people learned that the church's role in all of this was not permanent. In 1215, a gathering of church leaders called the Fourth Lateran Council, led by Pope Innocent III, made a decision that changed everything. They forbade priests from taking part in the ordeals. No more blessing the fire, no more blessing the water. And without the priest's blessing, the whole thing lost its meaning. The ordeal was supposed to be God's judgment. But if the church would no longer call God into it, it was just a person being burned or drowned. And that wasn't a verdict, it was just harm. So the practice lost its hold. Not all at once, but steadily, as the church's withdrawal spread from place to place. That shift didn't happen because everyone suddenly stopped believing in God. It happened because the people with authority over how the church worked decided that this particular use of sacred ritual had gone too far. The outcome was unpredictable. The results couldn't be managed or reasoned through. And increasingly, the kings and lords who were building more formal courts wanted justice that came from human reasoning and evidence, something they could shape and control, rather than a sign from God that nobody could fully predict. And that's the thing. Change in a place like this doesn't come because someone announces it on a Tuesday and everyone nods and does differently on Wednesday. It comes slowly, through small adjustments, through one generation watching the next. Try something a little different, through necessity pressing on habit until habit finally bends. Secular authority, meaning the power of kings and lords, rather than the church, gradually took greater control over the administration of justice. They built courts, they wrote the rules down. The jury system grew to fill the space the ordeal left behind. Groups of people called to hear evidence and give a verdict based on what they could actually see and weigh. Different from fire and water, yes, but still leaning on the same thing underneath. What the community believed, who they trusted, whose word carried weight. The faces changed. The form changed. The need stayed the same. But we should not think that meant the old way was simply wrong and the new way simply right. The people who stood in that church this morning were not foolish. They were practical. They were doing what they had to do with what they had. And what they had was faith, community, and the shared need for a sign everyone could accept. The ordeal gave them that. It held things together when almost nothing else could. No system of justice is perfect. Not then, not now. Every system reflects what the people using it believe, what they fear, what they value, and what they're willing to accept as true. The ordeal reflected all of those things for this village, in this century, in this life. And when those beliefs slowly shifted, when faith moved slightly, and authority moved closer, and evidence began to mean something different, the ordeal faded with them. Not all at once, slowly, unevenly, with plenty of places still holding on to the old ways, long after others had moved on. The fire has almost gone out now. The room is dark except for the last small glow of the coals. Your body's heavy. The cottage door is closed against the night, and the cold outside is pressing gently against the walls, and the village beyond them has finally gone quiet. There is nothing left to witness today, just the dark and the warmth still holding in the walls, and the long, slow pull of a body that has carried enough and is ready, at last, to set it down. The door closes behind you, and the dark inside feels different from the dark outside. Outside, it's open and cold, and the whole village is in it. In here, it's just yours. The fire is burned down to a small, steady glow. Not much heat left, but enough to see by. Enough to make the walls feel close in a good way. The rafters above are black with old smoke. You can't see them properly, but you know they're there. The same way you know everything in this room without looking. You've lived inside these few feet your whole life. You set the grain sack down against the wall. The sound it makes is heavy and final. Your shoulders lift about an inch the moment the weight leaves them. Just that small rise, and you stand there for a second feeling the absence of it. Your spine is sore from the base, all the way up between the shoulder blades. The same ache that started when you hoisted the sack this morning in the market lane. Before the church, before the pond, before any of it. You press the heel of your hand into the middle of your back, and it helps a little. Not much, but a little. The straw on the floor is worn flat in the places where you walk most, near the door, near the fire, and near the far wall where you sleep. You kick your boots off and feel the straw under your feet, dry and thin and familiar. Your stockings are still damp from the reeds at the pond. That cold wet that soak through slowly and never quite left. You peel them off carefully and drape them near the coals to dry. They hang there limp and dark at the edges, and the warmth from the fire reaches your bare feet right away. You just stand there and let it. There's no rush now. The day is done, asking things of you. There's a crust of bread on the shelf near the fire, hard at the edges, a little soft in the middle still. You eat it standing up, tearing it with your fingers, not tasting it much. Your body just needs something in it. The bread is dense and gritty the way it always is, and you chew slowly and stare at the coals, and the room is very quiet. Your palms are dirty. You can feel the grit in the lines of your skin, ash and mud and grain dust all mixed together from a day that started in the dark lane, moved through the market and the church and the pond, and ended here. You rub your hands together, slowly over the fire, not washing them, just feeling its roughness. The ash comes off in small dark smudges. You wipe your hands on your tunic and sit down on the edge of your sleeping mat. The morning feels far away, but it also feels right here. That's the strange thing about a day like this one. It doesn't leave just because the light does. You can still hear the dogs from before sunrise, that sharp barking in the dark blue morning. You can still feel the cold mud under your shoes when you stepped out half asleep. You can still feel the heat from the iron bar pressing against your face, even though you are standing 3 steps back from it. Softly, you can hear the village settling outside, a door closing somewhere down the lane, the low sound of wind moving across the thatch above your head, slow and rhythmic, like breathing, nothing else. The village that was so loud this morning, all boots and voices and barking, has pulled itself inside and gone quiet, and the quiet feels earned somehow. You lie back on the mats and feel the straw shift and press beneath you, the dry scratch of it through your tunic, the way it gives just enough and no more. Your back sinks in, and you feel every sore place in your body at once, your spine, your shoulders, your feet, the tight place at the back of your neck that has been there since the shout pulled you out of sleep this morning and never fully let go. You let out a long, slow breath and feel your body get a little heavier. In a quiet corner of your mind, the face of your friend is there, the one with the wrapped hand. You don't reach for the thought, it just comes. You see them the way you saw them this morning at the church, standing near the coals, shoulders pulled in, jaw tight. And you remember that other morning, 2 harvests back, the broken cartwheel, the fading light, and the hands that showed up without being asked. Both of those things are true at the same time, and your tired mind holds them both without trying to fix anything. The fire makes a small sound, just a soft shift of the coals settling. The light it casts on the wall moves a little, then goes still again. Your cloak is hanging near the door, and the bread is gone, and your boots are on the floor, and your stockings are still slowly drying, and there's nothing left to do today. That's what the dark gives you after a day like this one. All morning you were watched, in the lane, in the market, in the church, at the pond, eyes on you the whole time, everyone reading everyone else. Out there, you were part of something public and loud and heavy with meaning. In here, nobody is watching. In here, you are just a body that is very tired, lying on worn straw, listening to the wind move slowly and steadily across the thatch. The coals breathe their last small light across the floor. Your eyes are heavy. The tight feeling in your shoulders is slowly loosening, the way it does only when the body finally believes the day is over. The wound is still wrapped somewhere out there in the dark. The village is still holding its quiet 3-day breath. And the people who ran in that lane before sunrise, who stood in the church, who held a rope at the edge of a cold pond, They are all lying down somewhere just like this, carrying the same day you are. And that day, that whole long day, is worth carrying gently into sleep tonight. The people who stood in that church, who ran in the dark before sunrise, who held a rope at a cold pond, they weren't cruel. They were scared and tired and trying to hold their small world together with the tools they had. Fire and water were those tools. Faith was the frame around everything. That's worth sitting with quietly as the night settles in. If you find comfort here, drifting with us into true stories from the past, subscribe and let these quiet corners of ordinary lives carry you into rest. The village is still now, and so can you be.